fellowship, what I see here is, that is in 2014, January to June, Fulbright Nehru Fellowship at George Mason University in USA, where she could take up all her experiences here to the global level or across the seas. And she's been teaching UG, PG, and she has taken several PhD scholars also, and all of them are working in culture, history, and their applications. She's been teaching students of study abroad programs of American universities as part of Alliance for Global Education and for the University of Wisconsin. That is since 2009. And last year, my professor Heba sir and Samanvi, they had a visit to Banaras Hindu University, and a very good program was conducted. I couldn't attend then, but that is how these two great people met. And thanks to that one particular incident. And they were been telling me about Madam's, the way she treated subject, how she treated, the entire workshop was there. Since then, I was very interested. And yesterday, when Sir told me to introduce her, I was looking through some of her works, because I'm not able to comprehend it in a small span of time. And what catched me is her talks and the series with Morgan Freeman. All of us know this international star, how he has contributed to the culture and the majority of the narrowed things in the history. And well, ma'am, she was telling her interest is in ancient history, because she did that in Mumbai University. That's how it seeded in her, and started interpolating it to various aspects. You take any one subject which has an impact on cultural history or music, she will be able to tell. And what she was telling me is all these parameters which she has taken will be able to assess the contributions of these women who were known as Tawaifs. I welcome you, ma'am, for delivering your talk or lecture, and later we will talk much about it. Thank you, ma'am. I welcome Rajmohan Varambali, sir, to honor madam by giving flower.
Thank you, ma'am.
Namaskar. Kararavindena padaravindam Mukharavinde viniveshayantam Vatasya patrasya puteshayanam Balam mukundam manasa smarami. In this land of Balamukunda, I feel so honored to be here, and my heartfelt thanks to Hebar sir, because he gave me this opportunity to think about the contributions of these women who have tremendously enriched the culture of India in many ways. So it was something like a lifetime opportunity for me. I can see learned audience here, and just at the outset I would like to say that I'm not trained into any of these arts that I'm going to talk about. Neither dance nor music, nor even the cultured etiquettes which the Tawaifs were supposed to have taught to generations of nobility. So the question is, what makes me to be here? And this is my role of being ancient historian to begin with, but subsequently the continuous tradition which has brought us to the day-to-day, and we are paying our homage to one of the budding artists of Carnatic music, whom the god also liked to have her with in the god's darbar. So my homage to Ranjani ji in her memorial that we are having this lecture. To keep myself more in time, as I was joking with Hebarji today morning, that it is typically a teacher's syndrome that unless the bell rings, we don't stop talking. And I just don't want to go on and on. So I have written it down, that what I had to say. And in between, I'll be explaining things to make it more explicit. So I hope the audience would bear with me, because I know it at times might go a little monotonous, but I'll try to avoid it. So with these words, I'll start reading what I have prepared. I am a professional historian working in the field of ancient Indian history. While reading treatises related to cultural achievements during various historical periods, like any other historian, I also get mesmerized by the strides taken by Indians in the field of various arts. Indian historical monuments, proudly claiming the positions in the World Heritage, are absolutely awe-inspiring. A number of such monuments are not only unique pieces of architectural beauties, but they are also repositories of visual artifacts of different kinds. Paintings are another source for understanding the artistic achievements of the past. Related to our topic today, and I would like to say that I'm not calling it Tawaifs and Devadasis, I'm calling it Devadasis and Tawaifs, because for a historian, the historical chronology makes more sense. So obviously the tradition of the Devadasis is much more older than the Tawaifs that we have in India. So let's call it Tawaifs later and Devadasis first. The blend of subtleties of sublime emotion with aesthetics or the aesthetic joy that is produced by the performance, both can be imagined with the help of the sculptural ornamentation of the temple walls or with the help of paintings of the medieval period. Extraordinary treatment given to the bodily postures of women, along with distinct facial expressions, shows a high level of perfection attained by the artists. A pertinent question in this regard is the identity of the real women who must have been inspired the artists for such lively recreations. In ancient literature, we find ample evidences of a class of women called Ganikas, who were otherwise referred to as Nagara Shobhinis, Nagara Vilasinis, and many such names. They indicate their professional public life. They were women of exquisite beauty, intelligence, and skill in various arts and crafts. Sometimes they are also called Rupa Jiva, thereby signifying their beauty as an asset for their livelihood. It appears that these women must have been the models for the sculptors whom they have immortalized by the chisels and hammers, making the stones sing the song of life. In contemporary India, the dance artists who are trying to understand the traditional forms of various styles invariably turn to the sculptural representations fortunately available in abundance, primarily in southern and eastern India. One of my friends, who is a professional Odissi dancer, once told me that it is possible to imagine the entire body of a broken sculpture with the help of her knowledge of dance. Now that is something which really made me think that how over the centuries also, some of the things have retained their essence, and probably it went on getting polished over time, but the very idea or understanding of body, that has remained somewhere constant. This observation is a testimony not only of the artist's skills of the sculptors, but also a proof that they must have got real models before them in dancing postures. Here in Karnataka, innumerable sculptures of early medieval temples at sites like Bellur, Halebeedu and all, they are like live choreographically composed dances on stage. Once again, I'll come back to the same question of the identity of these women who have enriched the Indian culture like nowhere else probably it has happened, because we do have a number of ancient specimens coming from different civilizations. But there is a break, a long hiatus, and then the modern styles that have emerged. In India, we get a wonderful chance to study in continuation. So very often we call it that what is continued and what has undergone a change becomes a topic of research. So that opportunity we get because of all these sculptures and of course the living traditions. These must have been the women associated with the profession of entertainment, primarily through dance and music. The lively representation of women with various musical instruments on the Konark temple in Odisha could not be the expressions of the creative imaginations of the sculptors only. Their bodily postures while blowing an instrument that appears like that of Nagaswaram that we have just heard, rhythmic foot along with the fingers on the drum hanging from their neck, or the cymbals showing a delicate movement of the hands, seems nothing but snapshots of stage performance of dance and music. I would really like to appeal to the people in the audience, if you have not visited Konark yet, please do it at the earliest possible opportunity. And those even have visited, it's a site that you can keep visiting almost every year. What I would like to draw your attention to, because the position of these sculptures that I'm talking about is little at a higher elevation which you easily do not see. Usually what happens when you enter the Konark Sun Temple, first hall which is called Nata Mandira, which is full of the dancers' positions, an exhibition of all various dance postures. So usually more time one spends in seeing that. And then obviously all the sculptures which come in the level of your natural eyesight. The optical nerves can catch it up to a certain level. These are on the higher tiers, the parapets of those. And they are called Surasundaris sometimes, and supposed to be creating Mangala Dhwani so that some activity may begin. So I interpret it that way, that this sun and earth coming together to give life on earth, and these are the women with musical instruments. They are welcoming the sun god to have union with earth. So if we really read it as a text, though it is, I mean, it's such a wonder that it's a ratha, a chariot, but it is never going to move. Now these kinds of, apparent contradictions, and then you go beyond that and try to see life, something living, something which is so dynamic, that comes because of these sculptures. So these Surasundaris are something exceptional, and I think that makes a good beginning for the kind of research that we can undertake for temple dancers. From the texts like Nruchakatikam, we know the Ganikas who used to perform on stage, and their art was deeply appreciated by the audience. Like the whole love story of Vasanta Sena and Charudatta actually is because of her stage performance, and Charudatta is one of the best rasikas that she has got, and that's how she falls in love with him. So these references in literature also give us a clue that how these women in the profession, they must have attracted attention of the audiences, and the audience responding to that. Nruchakatikam is approximately dated to the 3rd century AD. In subsequent periods, the temple institutions emerged along with the feudal states across the country. Gradually, the rituals of worship started becoming elaborate functions going around throughout the day and in every month, hence giving ample chance for the festive gatherings. From the morning baths to the sleeping at night of various functionaries were associated with the temple for the service of the deity enshrined in the temple. Gods were also to be entertained with music and dance. For this purpose, women were specially appointed to be the temple dancers, along with a retinue of musicians. The temple rituals of Lord Jagannatha at Puri included dance by Maharis. There the Devadasis used to be called Maharis, who used to perform Gita Govinda every night before the god retires to bed. So that is something which was a part of a daily ritual. So daily Gita Govindam was performed in dance, and some musicians would be singing it along with that. And you know that the text Gita Govindam, as if it is meant for stage performance, the descriptions are such that you keep imagining these characters coming on stage and enacting. So much of bhava and abhinaya, which is all mixed with extremely wonderful poetry. It is difficult to trace the exact time and place of emergence of the system of women appointed for the service to the god, Devadasis, literally meaning women servants to the god, by way of dance and music. However, it does not seem to be earlier than the development of temple institution. In other words, it is probably not earlier than 6th to 7th century AD. It is typically a feudal practice where the feudal lords in the palaces and the gods in the temples had similar privileges, getting entertained by the professional musicians and dancers was one of them. May it be the service to the king or to the god. The entertainers were supposed to give their best. Hence, the right talents were searched for, and they were groomed with strict discipline. In this regard, both the men and women showed equal commitment. Men with knowledge in the art and grammar of dance and music were entrusted with the task of training young girls so that the perfection in the performance will not be compromised with. The appreciators of the arts were ensured immense joy by the performances of these well-trained performers, though usually the training was given by men, but there are examples of women of great acumen in music or dance were also respected as gurus. The urge for learning from the best guru made many artists from the Devadasi class to undertake long journeys and change of places of residence. The Devadasi Guru network appears to be a topic of historical research, and I think more work needs to be done. We get a lot of biographies of Devadasis, but this aspect somehow does not get so much highlighted. It is just a happening, like how this Devadasi was trained earlier at this place and later at this place, and finally she settled at this place. But this whole search of looking for the right kind of guru, or I want to learn a particular style of dance, or I want to learn a particular genre of music, is something which needs to be probed into more, and then write a treatise on that from that perspective. The perfection they sought for makes us wonder and respect their commitment to their art. Many persons of this tradition also have shown the generosity in terms of financial security and protection from the baser elements prevalent in the social life. So very often what used to happen is that these women, they used to be supported by their patrons in such a way that they will be spared for spending maximum time and mental peace into grooming their art. Had it not been the case, probably so many luminaries in this field probably wouldn't have been lucky enough to have them. Having given a brief background of the relation between the system of Devadasis and their art, we will now discuss the conditions of the Devadasis more in specific terms. We are lucky to have many biographical works, well researched and presented in a scholarly manner, regarding some of the gems who otherwise would have been lost to the tyrant fists of time. I myself have not worked on any of them. However, my readings forced me to think deeply on these amazing women whose contribution to Indian culture is immense. I feel absolutely humbled by the way volumes of contribution made by these women of our country with their fierce commitment to their art comes to light. During the times when gender discrimination was a social norm, these women earned name and fame because of their talent and hard work. It was not just because they were women they were appreciated. They were appreciated for being women of talent. For the convenience of discussion, we have made a classification of their contribution mainly in two parts. Since they were performists, their contribution can be assessed from the perspective of the technique of presentation as well as the impact it had on the audience. One very important historical fact that we can learn from the biographies of the Devadasis is that the married women from the common households hardly could get any training in performing arts. That makes it clear that the exclusive position of the Devadasi women vis-a-vis performing art was because of their social status. In other words, it was not so much as a matter of choice for them, but rather an unchangeable fact of their life. Over the generations of many Devadasis, their compulsion became their passion. By engaging themselves in rigorous training and maintaining a strict discipline, they achieved such mastery in art that some of the members of the household class could accept them as gurus for their daughters. Though the girls from the non-Devadasi families could be trained by the noted Devadasis in the art of dance or music, they were not allowed to become performers on the stage for a formal concert. Thus, they were not getting a chance to go through the scrutiny of a critical eye of the learned audience. Devadasis, because they were accepted or rather expected to be professional performers, could avail opportunities for working continuously towards perfection of their performances. So the point that I'm trying to make is that, as I said, that it is twofold. So one side is polishing and making their performance more and more appealing. Now this opportunity only the Devadasi class women they got. The women from the common walks of life, the householders, they did not get. So they learnt from their gurus and almost like Swanta, they did it. They wanted to have it for their own pleasure. But having it for the audience gives a different dimension to the performance. And that opportunity, since Devadasis got, they continued with it and they worked very hard to make their performances more and more appealing to the audience and getting their appreciation for that. This was one of the very important aspects for assessing the contributions to the field of art by the Devadasis. So today we have got a lot of dancers who are also claiming themselves to be event managers. How is it possible? It is possible because they have got the training of generations synthesized and reached up to them. So performance is not just what the artist she is presenting, but many other things which go simultaneously on the stage, and they could pay attention to that. And now this new dimension is, they are trying to become perfectionists in that. And they are now event managers along with being performers. So that contribution we have to see. The Gangotri is there somewhere, and now this is the present state of stage performances. So far as the audience is concerned, now this is the second dimension that I want to talk about. It is not so much instantaneous that the appreciation of a performance would emerge. It's very difficult to satisfy the audience, and especially the learned audience. The audience also needs to be well experienced in the nuances of the technique and the aesthetics of art to reach up to the highest level of joy through the performance of an artist. So, like in reading, we say, no, that if you're reading a book or some creative writing, it gets reproduced in the minds of the reader. So the reader also becomes a part of that production. Similar happens when we are having the stage performances. The audience is also recreating that performance in their minds. I'm not saying this happens to every audience, but if the audience is deeply involved into it, passionate about it, has huge experience of watching the stage performances, gradually this happens. And such audience giving applause to the performer definitely is a big trophy for the performer, rather than having whatever the monetary gains that they could be getting out of it. The audience also needs to be experienced, and that part that I said. In the theories of Indian aesthetics, it is said that the supreme bliss, moksha, can be achieved through the art if the performer and the appreciator, whom we call it rasika, attains the same level of mood that is expected to have emerged out of the performance. Bharata Muni especially has worked, given these kinds of discourses to us, that when do you consider any performance the best of it? That is, if the moods arise in the mind of the audience and what the performer is trying to show, or he also can be there. So the performer's act and the duplication of it in the mind of the audience, if it comes to an equilibrium, that is moksha. So the highest aesthetic joy is that. The pages of history are filled with the descriptions of the captivating performances given by the Devadasis on stage, and those are testimonies of the deep passion of the Devadasis towards their art and receptive audiences. These audiences are worthy of being called rasikas. We strongly feel that the account of the contribution of the Devadasis towards art cannot be completed without mentioning the impact that it had on the process of grooming the rasikas. While praising Surashri Kesarbai Kerkar, Smith Indira Gandhi is supposed to have said, and I quote, "Through the purity of her music and the dignity of her performance, she has molded our standards of appreciation and has profoundly impressed other musicians," unquote. So the performance itself becomes a training and learning experience for the audience. Here we would like to mention that some of the very learned gurus, having their own search for perfection and great appreciative minds, approached the talented Devadasis and expressed their wish to teach them, and what was achieved with deep meditation and textual learning. So, very popular documentary is there on the great Bala Saraswati. And her daughter is saying about one guru, such guru who came and told Bala Saraswati that he will be teaching her. She said that at his will, while expressing, he could sweat. He could change the color of his skin or face and things like that. Now, all that he wanted Bala Saraswati to learn. And it is his wish that he would come and give that to Bala. Now, this is something which creates such a synergy, and that's how the levels of performances goes from higher to the highest. Having said about the performers, teachers, and audience, we would also like to discuss certain specific examples. This is going to be more anecdotal than a formal discussion on the art and aesthetics. As has been discussed earlier, Devadasis were the women dedicated to God and attached for their services to the temples. A major part of their service was entertaining the god with dance and music. These women were wedded to the gods but had offsprings from their relation with certain human patrons. About this ritual performances, like The gods are to be worshipped with Anga Bhoga and Ranga Bhoga. So with Anga Bhoga we have got all those Shodashopchar pujas and all that, but Ranga Bhoga, so where dance and music was certainly one of the parts by which the god is to be worshipped. So it was a part of that ritual, and for that the professionals were appointed. By and large, the societal approach towards them was not very respectful, though their services were also sought for by the common households. Some creative writers have tried to probe into the lives of the Devadasis and present a picture of a human being beyond the role assigned to them by the tradition. The attitude towards them during the colonial period was more guided by the ideas of modesty and decency of the Western world, hence they were frowned upon. Legislation was passed against the practice of Devadasis without giving any consideration to their own respect for their tradition. Many Devadasis organized themselves in groups, those opposing the bracketing of all the Devadasis as Nautch girls and practicing or potentially prostitutes. However, their efforts did not yield fruit. They lost their assured patronage by way of financial support, and especially the encouragement earlier given to their art. Many Devadasis were forced to evacuate their traditional abodes near the temples, because the temple institution will also give them accommodation, a place, a house. We have got, like, I have worked on inscriptions of the early medieval period, and we get inscriptional references where these families were to be housed near the temple. So the donors used to create houses for them. And obviously, the other things probably were secured enough, like food and what they need for their costumes or for their ornaments and things like that. But gradually, because that practice itself was declared unlawful, even all those, and see, their properties were not recorded in their names. They were recorded in the name of the temple. It was the temple land, it was the temple precincts in which the Devadasis were allowed to stay. So obviously when their system was unlawful, their stay was also unlawful, and they were ousted. Some of the temples took a strong stand in favor of them. They said that we will not be recruiting the newer ones, but those who are there, they will continue staying there. But this did not happen everywhere, because you know, the kind of lust for land, and obviously the people who were responsible for the management of the temples and all that. Oh, I mean, this was an easy target for them, and grabbing that land, maybe in the name of God, but who got ousted were the living beings, like they were human beings with flesh and blood, and they were just lost, not to be traced after that anywhere. Many Devadasis, we just do not know where did they go, where did they end their lives. Nothing is known. They were also deprived of their hereditary privileges, ultimately pushed towards prostitution for survival in some cases. On the backdrop of these adverse conditions, the careers of some of the women from the Devadasi lineage are renowned as renowned dance or music exponents is worthy of special attention for the critics and academicians. The land of Goa had a long tradition of Devadasis. Some of the names belonging to this tradition are the choicest gems of the North Indian classical music. One of them, Surashri Kesharbai Kerkar, her lifespan is from 1892 to 1977. She was honored with the title Surashri by none other than Mahakavi Rabindranath Tagore, the Nobel laureate of India. She has been immortalized by the inclusion of her singing in the Voyager Golden Record sent into space in Voyager 1 and 2 in 1977. So her voice is there in the space. Where did she belong to? She was from the Devadasi tradition. So something was to be sent into the space, was chosen from that. So you can imagine that the contribution must have been so immense, so great, that it is immortalized this way. Why is Surashri Kesarbai Kerkar so important? It is mainly because of the insistence of maintaining the high standards of vocal music and her fierce commitment to perfection. She also was a master of a number of lesser known ragas, because many people, they don't sing those ragas. It was Kesarbai who was a repository of that. Unfortunately, not many continued with that tradition. So today, some modern artists who are trying to recover it from the pages of the past find it very difficult to see exactly how it was delivered. They know the notations, but of course the delivery is another part, which for that you need a living experience, and which is lost somewhere. She was well aware of the ideas of dignity and prestige that she had set in her performance. For 11 years, doing riyaz every day for 10 to 11 hours, under the guidance of the most noted guru of her times, Ustad Aladia Khan, Kesarbai became an example of dedication to art. Though she did not train disciples like her guru, but she became a legend in Hindustani classical music, leaving a deep impression on the minds of the listeners. Interestingly, her almost contemporary Gana Tapaswini Mogubai Kurdikar, whose time span is from 1904 to 2001, trained by the same guru at least for some time, created another storehouse of the experiences of Hindustani vocal classical music. One of the interesting facts about their status as disciples of Ustad Aladia Khan was that Mogubai did not know the greatness of this guru. It was Ustadji himself expressed the wish that he would be the guru of Mogubai. He had judged her potential. On the other hand, Kesarbai approached Ustad Aladia Khan, and it was not easy to make her take her as his disciple. So after a lot of negotiations, or of course her perseverance, asking Guru to be her Guru, and then ultimately with some terms and conditions, like she will not give independent stage performance till the Guru tells her. So she would be like accompanying him in his performances, and that's how the audience would get a chance to know her greatness of singing. But only after his demise, she started coming on the stage. So, and many other such things where the conditions, also good amount of money was demanded for that. But I mean, at the end of the day, see the product that came out. It, as I said, it was selected to be one of the pieces for the space voyage. The robustness of Kesarbai's musical acumen was undoubtedly unique, but the commitment to the traditional insistence on the purity of music with which Mogubai relentlessly practiced her art could not go unnoticed. Among the music critics, the singing of these two doyenies of music became the hot topics of debate, both being so extraordinarily talented that they must have posed a serious challenge to the music lovers and critics of preferring one over the other. We get some hints about these debates, like how people used to think that whether Kesarbai, or some would say Kesarbai, like no one can come closer to her. Some would say, oh, Mogubai, but because of her quality of voice or because of her... see, basically she was more approachable. She reached to maximum audiences. Kesarbai had a very kind of rigid choices of her audience also. Like she would not sing for anybody and everybody. She would sing for specific audiences. There is one story about her that gramophone company made records, and with lot of persuasion, finally she agreed to record. And then before bringing the records into the market, the company used to make the artist listen to it. And she said, some of them I need to redo. I'll record them again. Don't publish them. So the company kept on sending their people to her that, Madam, please sing for us today. Madam, please sing for us next week, or something like that. And she was very moody, like, a true Manaswini. We have got one Manaswini in the audience. So she kept on postponing it. Ultimately, a message came from the company saying that now if you don't do it, we are going to publish whatever has been recorded. So she consulted a lawyer whether she can sue the company in the court because she didn't want that to be published. So, but the lawyer said, no, you cannot do it because you already signed a contract with the company, so company can publish it. In any case, okay, after that she, for whatever reasons, but she gave up that thought of going to the court of law. But she sent a message to the company that henceforth never I'll sing for you. And there was a contract for long play records also, but she didn't sing for them. So sometimes such kinds of things. Also, there are some artists who never recorded their voice. And see, a deep spirituality with which they were so much engrossed. May them be the Tawaifs or from the Devadasi tradition, they refused to sing for the records. Their argument was that this is our God's gift. So long as God wants us to perform, we'll perform. And when no more our voice should be heard by others, we'll stop. Making it last for posterity, they did not agree with. Their kind of spirituality did not go with it. So they did not record. So such kind of selflessness and total dedication is so rare. And how could we say that these women were on the fringes of the society and had maybe baser cultures? No. They were deep into it, deep into spirituality, deep into religiosity, deep into the artistic and aesthetic trainings. And this was the outcome. When the film music started taking shape and a lot of these numbers what were popular amongst the Tawaifs and all that started going into the film music, they had very strong objection to it. Because they said, this is not the way we sing it. The mukhda part may be similar, but no, we don't elaborate upon it the way it has gone into the film music. So we don't want it to be sung that way. Similarly, many dancers, they were so upset about the dance numbers that they started seeing in films. Because there was a lot of compromise on whatever they considered as being the authentic version of their performance. So, I mean, all those things were happening towards the 1930s to 60s, like those 2-3 decades, all these dialogues and discussions that you can see. So the point that I am trying to make is that one of the contributions of that when these two Doinies were singing, it enriched the music critics also. Because if they have to say that I prefer Kesarbai over Mogubai or prefer Mogubai over Kesarbai, why? So you have to make it very explicit. And how can you make it more explicit unless you go very deep into it? Because at many layers, it's absolutely comparable and equal maybe. So that one fraction up also, you have to put your finger on and say that this is one up. And for that, one chooses Kesarbai over Mogubai or vice versa. This opportunity for the persons involved in the academic discourses of Indian music also should be counted in contributions of these women to the field of art. They guarded the specialities of Jaipur Atrauli Gharana with their devotion in the days when the music of different kinds was gaining popularity and the patronage for the kind of music these Gharana-bound artists produced was dwindling very fast. Thankfully, Mogubai had some disciples who became the torchbearers of her music. We are not going into explaining the words of the contribution made by these highly accomplished artists like Kesarbai or Mugubai, in the lack of our proper understanding of the nuances of Indian classical music. We certainly would like to say that the historical phenomenon of their music are like the treasures of Indian cultural heritage. At this point, I would also like to say what my elder brother, Keshavanna, is here. What he told me, rather made me see this. When was it happening? It was happening on the backdrop of Indian national movement. So, gradually, that nationalist fervor, that was also coming to these artists. So, our cultural heritage and the high pedestal on which we want to keep India vis-a-vis the Western culture, maybe vis-a-vis these colonial masters who are trying to suppress us, who are not acknowledging our great heights that we have achieved. So they put the best of their efforts to go more and more to the authenticity and purity of their performances or their study of music. And secondly, they trained their disciples also into the same tradition. In case of dance also, now this is highly debated issue, and certainly, as I said, that I am not anyway trained into any of these arts, so I am not the right person to say, but as a historian, how do I see these debates? Like in case of Sadir and Bharatanatyam, a lot of people are trying to relate it or associate it with certain castes, saying that the Sadir was belonging to certain caste, and then when the people who used to consider themselves members of the higher castes, when they adopted it, they deleted certain portion of it because, quote unquote, the vulgarity that they saw in the performances and things like that. It's so interesting to see that these supposed high class or high caste, class is a different thing, high caste people, well versed in Sanskrit, had no problem with Gita Govindam, which has got what used to be called as vulgar in the performances of Devadasis. There is a literary description of it in Gita Govindam. Of course, Jayadev's pen brings it to a much, much higher level, but the point is that you don't mind Vasanta Sena, you don't mind Radha of Gita Govindam, you don't mind Shakuntala, you don't mind Urvashi in Vikramavarshiyam. But you mind a Sadir artist performing Abhinay in a sensuous manner. These kinds of contradictions and these kinds of compulsions of the colonial period also have their contribution towards making these art forms undergo a major change, a transformation. So, as I said, not the right person to talk about it, but what usually we hear about Sadir and Bharatanatyam and all that Rukmini Arandile's whole effort to bring it to the decent level of performance, avoiding many of the sensuous abhinayas and look, I mean, the Shringar of Indian style, of tradition, certainly had its own way of expressions. But because of the Western influence also to a large extent about the decency, of course there are other reasons for British showing a very strong opposition to it. I'll discuss about the Tawaifs, but that also, many of these upper caste persons who were more into the circles of the Gora Sahib, they wanted their modesty and decency to become a part of their etiquettes. So that was another challenge. But anyway, I'm really thankful to my brother to draw my attention to this fact that how nationalism also had its influence on the performances of these Devadasis, who stopped being Devadasis in the traditional sense. See, because whatever little that they had got from their tradition, that was enough for them to sustain, along with little bit of what was considered as vulgar or not so appreciable by the society by and large, but under the carpet everything was going on. So they could have preferred that life. They could have preferred that position. They didn't. Taking the challenges even to the level of survival, Mogubai Kurudikar is supposed to have sustained only by eating puffed rice, but did not compromise with certain standards that she had set for herself and worked for it. Sometimes, because they used to be like, if we want to call them wives, but still they will be like second wives. So in vulgar terms, they were keeps of some rich people. They will ask them to have a certain kind of performance or a certain kind of clientele to be entertained. Many women, they walked out of it. A very peculiar case is of Anjani Bai Malpekar. She was of exquisite beauty. So she was a model for Raja Ravi Verma. Many of his paintings, the woman that you see in that painting is Anjani Bai Malpekar. And when she used to go for mahfils, men used to make unwelcomable advances towards her because of her beauty. And when she saw that her beauty is becoming a hindrance into her music or giving her music to the audience, she stopped singing. In fact, it had an impact on, it was physiological also. Her voice just disappeared. She couldn't sing at all. After a lot of, in those days the name was not counseling, today we call it counseling, but there were well-wishers and there were different kinds of, her appreciators who worked towards kind of helping her to regain her voice. And then she started just singing for herself or whatever spiritual or devotional ideas that she had. Very, very few choices people have got some tips from her for music. But you see, you lost an artist because of this kind of a stigma that was attached and with which the audiences who were not developed enough in their consciousness ruined an artist. So, it's so easy to blame Devadasi for the kind of tradition that they belonged to. But look at this example. We lost an artist because society looked at them in a particular way. So, when we are talking about the contributions, the potential contributions that we have lost, that also let's pay attention to. As was the case of artists from the Western India having their roots in the Devadasi tradition, so was the case of the artists from the southern part of India. We will be discussing this with two very distinct names, one in the field of music and another in the field of dance. Bangalore Nagaratnama, 1878 to 1952, and Bala Saraswati, 1918 to 1984. Both these great exponents, respectively in the field of music and dance, retained their pride in their Devadasi lineage, even during the most difficult times when the ban on the Devadasi system was legally executed. Bangalore Nagaratnama's life is an example of the unsparing efforts of the member of Devadasi community towards keeping their artistic torch burning against any adverse conditions. No obstacles could stop them from being engrossed in their sadhana. Their art was their life sap. They used to appreciate each other for their art, and the young apprentices were asked to learn the nuances of dance and music from other Devadasis known for their exceptional skills. In that Bala Saraswati documentary, we can hear Pandit Ravi Shankarji talking about Veena Dhanamal and her contribution. Gurus will approach certain potential prodigy for imparting the best knowledge of a practice in a particular genre. All this happened in case of both these artists, that is Nagaratnama and Bala Saraswati. Since we are here in South India, we know that the learned audience here will be well aware of the greatest achievements of both these artists taken here by, we are only taking them as examples. Hence, we will only discuss them in the context of their contribution. As has been mentioned earlier, the contribution by the artists can be seen in multidimensional way. First and foremost is how the artists have experienced and communicated through their performance the deeper of the deepest levels of the aesthetic joy inherent in any art form. In case of Bala Saraswati, this becomes amply clear that her performance could mesmerize the audiences all over the world. This becomes possible when the art touches the mind and soul of the audience. The idea of moksha, enshrined in the Indian tradition of art and aesthetics, as we mentioned earlier, is achieved by the artists. Training of Bala Saraswati under the guidance of the ablest gurus inculcated the values of perfection in her performance. Practicing each and every step for years before entering into the final presentation of a particular repertoire has been the strongest point of this training. In case of both the artists presented here, another important thing to be noted is that their gurus led them towards the towards the holistic approach to art. Nagaratnamma and Bala Saraswati were exponents of a particular form, that is music and dance respectively, but had a good training into the other. That is to say, Bala Saraswati had taken lessons in music and Nagaratnamma was trained into dance. Interestingly, Moguvai Kudikar also had training in Kathak, a North Indian dance style. But it is said that she stopped dancing because she felt that strong footwork in dancing is hampering her singing. So she sacrificed one and she concentrated on the other. But I think the woman of her level of intelligence would have been a master of dance also. The holistic imbibement must have been one of the factors responsible for their communication with the audience, bringing them to the state of bliss. The greatest masters of Hindustani tradition, like Pandit Ravi Shankar and Pandit Birju Maharaj, praised Bala Saraswati for the universal appeal of her performance. Pandit Birju Maharaj, appreciating Bala Saraswati for her epic performance of the famous bhajan Krishna Ni Begane, is an unforgettable sight for the viewers. One gem explaining quality of the other gem is beauty in its transcendence. Really, I mean, I would appeal the audience, if you have not seen it, please see it. The way Birju Maharaj expresses what Bala Saraswati used to do in Krishna Ni Begane. I mean, it's a marvelous, just a clip of few, not even 1 minute, but it's too great. Today, when the world is trying to look for the solutions for lasting peace, one very important requirement is of promoting the mutual trust and respect among members of different cultures. Transcending the boundaries of nation states, the institutions and the scholarships established for carrying forward the legacy of Bala Saraswati in the field of Indian classical dance certainly will go a long way towards building the atmosphere suitable for creating a world heritage in the true sense of the term. Imagine the impact on the minds of the dancers from foreign culture trained in the Bharatanatyam visits the temple of South India when she will be exposed to the sculptural representation of the dance postures, and the joy and the bliss would come to her mind. In fact, that is what is happening, and many countries are including Indian dance and music in their university teaching programs. She has paved the way for the Indians to torch the souls of humans all over the world through her art. What could be a bigger contribution than this? See, very often what is happening especially in peace discourses, what people talk is the respect for the other culture. It doesn't come very easily unless you have got some such strong bridges. When you learn to appreciate others, your conflicts will get minimized. And the contribution of Indian artists in this field, like may it be Pandit Ravi Shankar or may it be like just now what we are talking about, Bala Saraswati. Like Bala Saraswati used to be a visiting faculty in many American universities. And from Japan to California, everywhere, like people are saying that whenever there will be any possibility even of Bala Saraswati's show, it will be sold within no time. Once one of her disciples was saying that she wanted to have blessings from Bala. And what she saw was where Bala was staying and a long queue. She just was saying that I couldn't see the end of the queue. So, I mean, touching the hearts of people who are belonging to a totally different cultural band baggage with them. It's enormous. Walking out of the fences that the contemporary society had tried to create around the performers from the Devadasi tradition, these women became autonomous institutions within themselves, and that too without underplaying their origins from their Devadasi lineage. They didn't want any support, they were themselves institutions. Their mothers, their sisters, their aunts, and generations of women who were the perpetuators of the science and art of dance and music were their ideals. From Japan to America, Bala Saraswati was the most sought after artist from India. More importantly, the world was eager to learn from her. She was called for teaching learning lessons. And she used to learn from the ballet dancers. She used to kind of try to understand, ask more details about it. And this was so mutual. She became the golden thread that bound the world community with a sense of mutual respect and understanding. How did she achieve it? One probable answer lies in her aspiration for perfection. It is said that once she made a very negligible mistake in one of her steps while performing. She was very upset about this and visited the Chidambaram Nataraja temple to ask for pardon from the Supreme Lord of Dance. It is the greatness of Bala Saraswati that the name and fame that she had earned with such hard work never made her forget her roots. Thus, when the time demanded, she was very critical about the anti-Devadasi campaign. Most importantly, she did not give up dance as many Devadasis had to do due to the ban on their public performances. How else she could have done it if not for the excellence that she had achieved in her art with hard work? We have taken Bangalore Nagaratnam as another example of showing the undaunted spirit of a member of a Devadasi community against all the odds posed by the social reforms in the name of removing the evil of the prostitution. T.M. Krishna, a leading vocalist of Carnatic music, rightly has pointed out the contradictions inherent in the elitist, male-centric reformist principles that brought an abrupt end of a tradition that was centuries old. Men fostered the system of Devadasis. They used to be entertained by the Devadasis. In the name of God and temple service, they created an exploitative system, and when it was the time to roll it back, under the pressure of the 20th century morality, the Devadasis became the worst evils of the society. How does one remove this paradox or work on this contradiction? By imposing a ban on the system, these protectors of the tradition were condemned to become beggars or mere prostitutes. Looking in retrospect, one gets awestruck to know the strides taken by Bangalore Nagaratnamma for maintaining the respect of her community as a real custodian of art. As a young girl, her mother spent every bit that she had to provide the best guidance available during those days for a daughter of a Devadasi in the art of music. Nagaratnamma was proficient in the major languages of South India, that is Kannada being her mother tongue. Subsequently, she became expert in Telugu and Tamil also. She had lessons in Sanskrit from a learned scholar in early stage of her life. She had fair knowledge of English too. She wrote verses in South Indian languages in addition to editing books especially prevalent amongst the Devadasis. Now this chapter of her life is so interesting that there were certain dance dramas written into form of texts and she wanted them to be published. But because of the so-called decency of the times, they were considered more vulgar, and even, so initially it was very difficult for any publisher to get the acceptance for publishing that. And even when some did, they were forced to burn the published copies of those books. That was the resistance. So what we get now, some few copies here and there, and now they are kept in the archives. But see the attempt of that woman. She could get the sense of the times and she wanted it to be published for posterity. The publication of such books was banned, condemning the erotic contents. Nagaratnamma was a born leader. She challenged the Devadasi abolition bill in the court. We are not claiming any research on the life and achievements of Nagaratnamma. We are only trying to point out the enormity of her efforts to protect the dignity of her community. These acts may not have led to any victory in the strict sense of the term, but these were landmarks in the history of art tradition. Apart from her concerts and recordings by way of performance and her speeches, her revolutionary act vis-a-vis annual Aradhana celebrations at the place of Tyagaraja's Samadhi has carved her name permanently in the history of Carnatic music. Over the years of her practice and training in Carnatic music, Nagaratnamma developed a spiritual bonding with the most revered saint, Tyagaraja. She undertook the task of renovating the Samadhi site of Tyagaraja. During Nagaratnamma's time, two rival groups were presenting annual Aradhana in the village where Tyagaraja was born. Being a woman, and that too a Devadasi, she was not allowed to perform puja and pay homage to her Manasa Guru, and that too Manasa Guru by the members of the Aradhana committees. Now see how interestingly what she does. When we are counting the contributions, just see the effort of one single individual to bring out all those women or the tradition from the stigma. What she did, she purchased the land where Tyagaraja's Samadhi is located, constructed a monument, and also conducted Aradhana by inviting Devadasi teams. Parallel Aradhana, the traditional Aradhanas of two rival groups were going on. She had the third one, and where she invited the Devadasis to perform. Famous personalities like M.S. Subbalakshmi also performed in her Aradhana festival. Historically speaking, there is no parallel to these acts by Nagaratnamma. She spent almost all her wealth for the creation of the Samadhi Mandir. She also tried to bridge the gap between the two Aradhana groups. However, she did not succeed. For our discussion today, the point that we are putting forward is of the assessment of the contribution of this member of Devadasi community towards Carnatic music. Creation of Tyagaraja's monument and the annual Aradhana ritual of paying homage to the great exponent of Karnataka music, both are marks of her vision and commitment to the art. She certainly learnt from her gurus the art of literature, but the strong resolve that she took of renovating the place related to Tyagaraja and her decision of actively participating in the Aradhana ritual was out of her own inner drive. Such examples become inspiration for generations in one form or the other. Historically speaking, Bangalore Nagaratnam's contribution lies in such efforts. I have a small write-up on Tawaifs because I thought that because I am here in Karnataka, more closer to the Devadasi tradition, let me go more into details of it. But I belonged to North India now for 20 years. I have been staying in Banaras. And Banaras is known for Tawaif traditions. Very rich Tawaif tradition was there. I'll just start with a small anecdote that there was one very famous Tawaif of Banaras, Husnabai. She had her kotha. The places where they reside and they used to perform were called kothas. So, and Banaras being a place of lot of active commerce, traders and merchants used to come, and then they used to visit these kothas and listen to the music of these baijis, they used to be called. So, two merchants, very wealthy ones, they went to Husnabai's kotha, and obviously these baijis will have their attendants, so the attendant went, welcomed them, and then they said ki baiji ka gana sunna hai, want to listen to baiji. So this attendant went inside and said, the baiji, two merchants have come to listen to your song, singing. She said, tell them I am not well, so today I will not perform. And these baijis had that command, that respect. If they say they will not sing, nobody will force them to sing. So the merchants went away. Now this attendant was quite intrigued and she said, Baiji, why did you do that? You are perfectly fine in your health. She said, those who do not have the decency of climbing the stairs of my kotha, I am not going to sing before them. It was like their self-generated position. Nobody bestowed it on them. They earned it by their skills and commitment to art. So with that anecdote, let me present a small thing that I have prepared. There is hardly anything in common between the Devadasis and Tawaifs, except one factor, that is their role in continuity and enrichment of music and dance traditions. Tawaifs mainly come from the northwestern and North India, ultimately having their last resorts in Kolkata or in Bombay. With decline of the royal patronage and the anti-Nach campaigns during the colonial period by the reformers, the Tawaifs became a practice of the past. The law prohibiting their profession came almost like a final blow. The Tawaifs lost the societal support and gradually became the practice which is to be just heard of from the senior members of the society. Many turned to prostitution for their survival. Unfortunately, along with the Tawaifs, India lost a substantial treasure of their art. Much similar to the examples of the Devadasis, many Tawaifs also have left behind a lasting impact on the dance and music. The real contribution of the Tawaifs is that many of them agreed to record their singing through gramophone technique. Innumerable talented artists of the Tawaif class have remained unknown to the world in the want of any written or audio recording of their artistry. The attitude of the society underwent a change and their art started getting acknowledgement, leaving behind the stigma attached with their profession due to the ideas of decency that had gained currency during the colonial period. This is a success, though in a limited quantity, of the perseverance of the true artists among the Tawaifs. These women were fighting against many odds to retain their identity as artists and not being women who were forever interested in exploiting their men acquaintances for material gains. This is amply proved by the role of many Tawaifs in 1857 War of Independence. This is a glorious chapter of Indian history, how Tawaifs contributed and supported the revolutionary acts of 1857 to begin with, and also subsequently many a times. British treated them very harshly because of their involvement with the revolutionaries. Many received corporal punishments also. There is always a close association between the soldiers and the brothels. What became a matter of pride for the Indians is the extreme sacrifice of the Tawaifs for the cause of their own country. Who will forget the lead role that Begum Hazrat Mahal played in trying to oust the British from the state of Awadh? Because Wajid Ali Shah was already thrown away and he settled in Calcutta. Begum Hazrat Mahal, because she was from the Tawaif community, but Wajid Ali Shah had a peculiar liking for many Tawaifs, so he used to have some kind of a contractual marriage for them. So in one way they used to become Begum, but they were Tawaifs nonetheless. She took the lead. She joined hands with Nana Sahib Peshwe, Tatya Tope and all those great revolutionaries of 1857 and kept fighting. And the fort was guarded by her soldiers for a very long time. It was the longest siege during the British period. Begum Hazrat Mahal played the lead role that she played in stopping the British from coming to Awadh. Ajizan Bai of Kanpur participated in 1857 episode by creating an armed squad of the Tawaifs and fought against the British. She learnt pistol and she trained her kind of Tawaifs. They had money to acquire the arms. She used that for acquiring arms and she made a brigade of her own. Like we have got Jhansi Ki Rani having a brigade of women. This Tawaif had a brigade of women and she fought against the British. Ultimately, she was captured and she was given an offer that you lead a kotha. Because British soldiers also used to go to kothas and many of them were her appreciators or customers in bad sense. But she said no. So she was tied to the gunshot and blown by the British. These brothels, and that is what I want to say. The British were very harsh and they gave very strong blows to Tawaif tradition, mainly because the Tawaifs used to be hands in gloves with the revolutionaries. And to control the revolutionaries, they smashed the system of Tawaifs. Their brothels were a threat to the British. Hence, under the pretext of upholding a moral position, the British targeted these Tawaifs and their culture was completely destroyed. After being robbed of their traditional status and to a large extent their financial support, these women turned towards other means of livelihood, primarily with the capital of their art. Gramophone records can be seen as big savior. It immediately supported the artists monetarily, but more importantly, preserved their singing for posterity. Such interesting thing Arvindji was saying, like I have read about Gauhar Jan and all that. And how do we know it for sure? Because those times this gramophone company will have that discs cut on wax and then sent to Germany for final production. So whose singing is this? So the singer had to announce her name. And that's how we know many Tawaifs who have sung for the gramophone company, their names are there. And their names very often used to have some part of it indicative of their place of origin also. Like somebody Allahabadi or Agrewali. So we know that they were from those places. So Gauhar Jan used to say it in English, my name is Gauhar Jan. Gramophone records can be seen as big saviors. The other rescue was the emerging film industry. Many women from the Tawaif background became artists, singers, and even producers and directors of the films. Many of the famous heroines of the Hindi cinema belong to the Tawaif traditions. They were daughters of some noted Tawaifs who went into the film industry as background singers or something like that, and then their daughters became the artists for cinema. Because women from other families were not allowed to go, even on the stage performance, like for Parsi theatre and all, lot of Tawaifs were taken in. Because for female roles, the men used to enact as female. Women were not allowed to go to stage to perform. So these Tawaifs, they took it up. Like Bharatanatyam, the Kathak dance also was staged under the auspices of many music and dance organizations in Kolkata mainly, but also some in Bombay. That's how the Kathak became a popular dance form, and then the women from the other families also started sending their daughters to learn Kathak. Coming back to our discussion on the contribution of the Tawaifs to the artistic traditions of India, it is very easy to say that they mastered their art and serious involvement, mastered their art with serious involvement and passed it on to the generations of Indians. Keeping some darker portions of their lives to themselves, they retained their identities as artists. Our Indian culture is primarily a composite culture, our theme last year that we were having. Tawaifs have contributed in enriching this compositeness. Many Muslim ustad trained the Hindu women. Hindu nobles were trained in the etiquettes of the royalties by the Muslim Tawaifs. They sang songs in praise of Krishna and Muhammad, irrespective of their own faith. I mean, it's so interesting that Hindu women can sing for Muhammad or whatever those Sufi saints were, and the Muslim women would sing Krishna songs or Shivji's songs. Thus, Gauharjan, a Tawaif from North India, could sing a song of Holi being celebrated in Medina by Hazrat. It's such a beautiful number. I think you all should try to capture it on YouTube. Mere Hazrat ne manai Madine, Mere Hazrat ne Madine mein manai Holi. Now, Medina has got nothing to do with Holi. But Indian Muslims, they Indianized Islam also. And Gauharjan herself was I think she was a world citizen, because her father was somewhere from Europe, her mother was Armenian, then the father left mother and child, so the mother adopted Islam, then she was taken in as keep by some Hindu people and all that, so like she was a world citizen. But see the number that she's singing. Many of these Amir Khusro's songs, these Tawaifs have made it very popular. Like there is such a beautiful anecdote about it. The famous number which is there, it's the description of the spring, and okay, the story I'll tell you, wordings I'll recall. Khwaja Muhyiddin Chishti was Amir Khusro's guru, and he was not meeting his disciples and in some kind of a seclusion. And Amir Khusro wanted him to talk to him, wanted him to give his darshan to his shishyas and all that. What to do, he was thinking. Then he saw a group of people carrying mustard flowers, sarso ke phool. So he said that where are all these going basketfuls of sarso ke phool and all that? So they said it is Vasanta Panchami celebration and they are offering these golden flowers to Mata Saraswati. So he got an idea. He also took basketful of mustard flowers and he went to his Khwaja, and in his darbar he started dancing and singing. And that's how he could appease his guru, and then guru started giving discourses to his shishyas and all that. So, Sakala bana phool rahi sarso, These are the words. Now, Sakalban Phul Rahi Sarso, which is written by Amir Khusro for Khwaja Muhyiddin Chishti, is sung by the Hindu Tawaifs. So, these kinds of contribution towards building up this composite culture of India, that is our base. That's how our country doesn't break into pieces. And they have made contribution into it. There the kothas were open to all. There was no restriction about any caste or religion or anything. And they knew where to stop, how much distance is to be maintained. So that's something I think we should think of. Obviously, with the same eclectic spirit, she became one of the first ones to record her voice for gramophone. As I told you that there was a lot of apprehension about recording the voice in gramophone records. She was one of the first ones. Two girls from South India have recorded almost on the same dates. And Gauhar Jan. So she is one of the earliest. With the passage of time, the Tawaifs lost their wealth, patronage, and respect. But the iron fist of time could not rob one thing from them, their glorious history. Today, the women from different backgrounds are performing Kathak and singing Thumri, Dadra, Chaiti, Kajri, Tarana, etc. All those once in the custody of these Tawaifs as genres of their identity. Through them, the art and culture of the Tawaifs is thriving. Their charms are attracting the audiences even today. Their costumes, jewelries, and repertoire are time-tested performances, polished by generations of Tawaifs. Huge repositories by way of poetic compositions in Bhojpuri, Urdu, Persian, Punjabi are important sources of linguistic history of India coming from the custody of the Tawaifs. Ghazals having very high poetic value reached up to the masses because of the impressive singing by women from this tradition. This was possible because they used to be trained in classical languages like Urdu and Persian, like Persian and Arabic by the experts of those languages. Some of the Tawaifs themselves also used to compose poetries and were published also to reach up to the readers well versed in Urdu, Persian. They used to have their own divans. Divans are a very particular kind of compilation of poetries, and that needs to be kind of acknowledged by certain ustads. Then only the publishers will take it for publishing. And Tawaifs had divans of their own. They used to write. And they used to be highest taxpayers. They used to maintain records of their accounts, which again are different kind of contributions for study of history. And very interestingly, how they could participate in national movement and all that, because they were one of the highest subscribers to English newspapers. That's how they used to keep themselves quite updated, and their pace was like absolutely fascinating. To sum up, we would like to say that Devadasis and Tawaifs are excellent examples of human endurance against all odds. Art was their main strength with which they flourished, accepting the role casted for them by the society during different times. They did not walk out of the patriarchal structure which was the base of their position as either Devadasi or a Tawaif, but used their art as liberating force. Now this is something which I really want to say. What must have helped them to sustain in so much of odds? That's the art. Bangalore Nagaratnamma's quest ended with Saint Tyagaraja, in whom she found her ultimate destination. There must have been innumerable such examples when the women in the profession of entertaining the gods or the humans could up to the blissful state that a conscious human aspires for. Their contribution in the true sense lies in the fact that they kept the flame of the artistic creations high. Their message seems to be a single-minded effort towards transcendence from the gross sensuousness to subtle moksha. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the wonderful discourse here. Repeatedly, Madam was mentioning about her brother, Sri Keshav Paranjape. He is here, and in her talk, she has already told us how he has contributed to whatever work she has done. Yesterday, when I met her, she was talking about the composite culture, which they also involved last year. And today, the subject itself is highly composite, if you see, by the terms of origin and its deliberations. Am I allowed to talk a little bit of my mind? Okay. So she started telling that Tawaifs are later, Devadasis are first. And when she started with those beautiful words or synonyms for Devadasis, it was wonderful. And what was very catchy there was, it's a low word catchy, but what interested me personally is the word she said, how ancient aesthetics and moksha was related when they performed certain art things, how they could get the rasa, I would say equal frequency with the audience. It's brilliant. And I guess somewhere when she started talking about Tawaifs, I missed that point. It was all about their egos, how they maintained their social respects, and how they paid their taxes. It came to that. I think in the beginning, when she started with Nagara Shobhini or all those things, that was of highest order. I think somewhere I happened to talk to Heba sir, because when he was reading Gauharjan, I was just thinking, and ma'am mentioned, and every day I had an episode, I would ask him, what did you read today? And he was mentioning about all her recordings, what she did, everything. But one point I remember, once a king of small place, he called her and he didn't allow her to sing for a quite number of days, that this girl is frustrated. And suddenly she sings very well. Now I have, as you started as a researcher, I wanted to look at the gaps. You said that is finding out. What I saw is these Tawaifs, whatever background, did they knew what they had, what talent they had? What is the higher purpose of the talent, what they were showcasing in public, I don't know. At the same time, if you look into probably the younger generation, old ones already you're well versed, you're only here to see how it is re-narrated and reiterated. But if you see the young generation, they have a good voice and there are mentors, what to do. Event managers are there, mentors only. I can see in the young ones in my case. So they need to know the higher purpose. Rather than Tawaif's transition, I think Devadas is what the purpose of it. For example, Puri Jagannath, what happened? We need to look more into that. And all the young generation, as Madam was pointing out about Manaswini, they should know, I think. And one more thing, ma'am was telling about Mogubai ended up taking only puffed rice for what she didn't compromise. These are the small things we looked into. Sir is restricting my time, so I think I thank the audience, I thank Madam, and I wanted to say one more thing, and it's 100 years of Vedanta studies. Madam students are engaged in this work also, and she's been giving a series of National Geographic lectures with Morgan Freeman, isn't it, ma'am? Okay. Yeah. So all those things are there. It was a great pleasure to listen to her. We can go on. And personally, I would want to listen to the first half part where whatever Bharata Muni said and how these females, women of talent, was contributing to the society. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a wonderful talk. Very inspiring, well prepared, and you have given wonderful contents, We have to think on these lines in different angles. Thank you very much. We are going to have the next session in the evening, sharp at 5 o'clock, inaugural, and followed by Ramana Balachandran's Veena recital. Please come in time and join us here. A very short inaugural will be there, a formal inaugural. We are yet to light the lamp. We will light it in the afternoon, in the evening, and in the presence of our esteemed guest, Dr. Binda Paranjape Madam. Namaste. ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಬಂದು ಇಷ್ಟು ಹೊತ್ತು ಕೇಳಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ, ಆಲಿಸಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ, ಪೋಷಿಸಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ.